A barn stands alone at the end of a dirt road in northern Maine, swallowed by snow, and silence, its roof sagging like the spine of something that has been waiting a long time to be found. A girl stands in front of it, 18, thin coat, a duffel bag at her feet, an iron key in her closed fist still warm from being held for 300 miles. She does not know yet what is buried beneath the floor. She does not know who has been writing her letters every year of her life, or why none of them ever reached her. Down in the village, a black car waits at the curb of a general store. Inside the car, a man in a $400 overcoat checks his watch. He has been expecting her arrival for 9 days. The wind picks up. The girl steps forward. The key slides into the lock. The day Lena Hartwell turned 18, the sky over Hartford was the color of dishwater. That gray. The kind that doesn't promise rain or snow or anything at all. Just gray. Like the world had given up choosing. She stood at the window of room 14B Stonebridge House, 3rd floor. Her duffel bag at her feet. Her whole life inside it, 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts. A hairbrush missing half its bristles. A paperback she'd read 4 times. And the cardigan her mother had been wearing that night. The blue one. With the little wooden buttons. They'd given it back to her in a plastic bag, stiff with cold from the morgue locker. And she'd worn it once. Just once. Then folded it small, tucked it deep. Because some things you don't wear. You carry. A knock at the door. Lena, Mrs. Reeves wants to see you. She turned. Sasha. 14, freckled, watching from the hallway like Lena was already half a ghost. Tell her I'll be right down. Sasha didn't move. You scared? No. Liar. Lana almost smiled. Almost. She picked up the duffel. Took one last look at the room. The dent in the wall where the radiator banged in the winter. The water stain on the ceiling shaped like a sleeping dog. The corner where she'd cried herself to sleep for 2 solid weeks after the funeral. None of it had been hers. Not really. She'd just been borrowing space. She closed the door. Mrs. Reeves's office smelled the way it always smelled. Stale coffee. Lemon disinfectant. The faint chemical sweetness of the air freshener she plugged in every morning. The official perfume of institutional sympathy. She was sitting behind her desk in her good blouse. The pearl one. The one she only wore on intake days and discharge days, which were really the same day, just from different sides of the door. Sit down, dear. Lena sat. Mrs. Reeves slid the envelope across the particle board. Manila. Thin. Disappointing in a way Lena couldn't name yet. This is it, sweetheart. Your inheritance. The word hung there. Between them. Absurd. Inheritance. Like she came from somebody. From who? Your maternal grandmother. Margaret Hartwell. The state located her will. My grandmother. Yes. I don't have a grandmother. Mrs. Reeves's smile didn't change, which was the cruelest part. Because Lena had said it like a fact, the way you'd say, I don't have a car, and Mrs. Reeves had heard her and just kept smiling. You did, sweetheart. She passed about 6 months ago. The probate took some time. 6 months. So her grandmother had been alive while Lana was here. while Lena was eating cafeteria mashed potatoes and staring at that water stain on the ceiling. Her grandmother had been somewhere, breathing, and then she'd stopped, and Lena hadn't known. "Open it, dear." She opened it. Inside, one iron key, pocked with rust, cold in her palm like it had been kept in a freezer, and a folded yellow document, a deed. 1 acre of land, 1 barn, a town called Stonebridge, Maine. Population, she'd find out later, 487. No house, no money. Just dirt in a building hundreds of miles north in a town she'd never heard of. She looked up. A barn. Yes, that's it. Sometimes a fresh start is the best inheritance, Lena. Lena said nothing, because what she wanted to say was, a fresh start would have been a phone call. A fresh start would have been a birthday card. A fresh start would have been anybody telling me I had a grandmother before they told me I'd lost her. But she didn't say it. She'd learned a long time ago. Disappointment was the air they all breathed in this place. There was no point in exhaling. "There's a bus ticket, too," Mrs. Reeves said, "and $100 in transition funds. The bus leaves at 3:45. Lena closed the envelope. She stood up. "Thank you, Mrs. Reeves. Take care of yourself, dear." She walked out. She did not look back. The bus terminal smelled like diesel and old French fries. Lena bought a coffee with one of her singles, 68 cents. She watched the cashier count the change into her palm like she was being tipped. She found a seat near the window, 3rd row from the back. Set her duffel between her feet. Pulled the envelope out one more time. Tucked into the deed. A second piece of paper. Newer. Slick. A letter. Crane Industries. She read it twice. Then a third time. Because the third time was when the prickle started at the back of her neck. $8,000 for 1 acre of dirt and a fallen down barn. The letter was dated 9 days ago, which meant they'd been watching the probate. Which meant they'd known about her before she'd known about herself. Which meant somebody somewhere had been waiting for the moment a teenage girl turned 18 and could legally sign her name to a thing. $8,000. She thought about it. Really thought. $8,000 was an apartment for a year. It was a winter coat that actually fit. It was groceries that didn't come from a vending machine. It was the difference between surviving and just barely surviving. She should sign, take the money, find a city, disappear into the kind of life nobody offered to teenage girls from state homes. Except, why were they offering $8,000 for nothing? $8,000 was not a generous offer for valuable land. $8,000 was a lowball offer for something they wanted desperately. And life had taught her one thing more than any other. Nothing was ever that easy. The bus pulled out of the terminal at 3:46. Lena pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watched Hartford slide away into the gray. She did not cry. She wasn't sure she remembered how. The world bled out of color the further north they went. First the strip malls, then the gas stations. Then the highways narrowed and the forests pressed in from both sides. Pine and birch. Skeleton branches. The ground turning white in patches, then in stripes, then in full. By the time they crossed into Maine, the snow was coming down sideways. The bus was almost empty. An old man in a hunter's cap, 2 rows ahead. A woman with a baby asleep against her shoulder. The driver humming. Lana watched the trees go by. She did not think about her grandmother. She did not think about her mother. She tried not to think at all. But the mind does what the mind does. And hers kept circling back to one thing. A barn. She left me a barn. Why a barn? Why this barn? Why now? The bus slowed, groaned, pulled into a depot the size of a tool shed. A single hand-painted sign. Welcome to Stonebridge, Pop, 487. The doors hissed open. The cold hit her like a hand across the face. She'd never felt cold like this. This wasn't winter. This was teeth. This was the kind of cold that crawls under your skin and looks around for something to take. She was the only one who got off. The bus pulled away, red taillights swallowed by white. And then it was just her, standing in 2 inches of fresh snow. Her useless thin jacket, her duffel bag, the iron key cold in her pocket. Alone. She'd been alone before, but not like this. This was alone with edges. Main Street was 3 blocks long. A general store, a post office, a diner with a flickering pink neon sign that said Ruthie's, a law office, a hardware store, a handful of houses with smoke curling from their chimneys like polite ghosts. The general store had a bell on the door. When she pushed it open, the bell rang sharp, and the warm air rolled out and met her like a body she hadn't known she needed to fall into. Wood smoke, coffee, sawdust, cinnamon somewhere underneath. A man stood behind the counter reading the newspaper. White beard, suspenders, glasses on the end of his nose. He looked up. He looked at her for a long second. Then he set the newspaper down, slowly, like it mattered. Not from around here, he said. It wasn't a question. No. You're looking for Margaret's place. Lena went still. How did you... You've got her eyes, child. He said it gentle, almost a whisper, and something in Lena's chest. Something small and tightly wound. An ancient gave half a turn. She didn't answer. She couldn't. He came out from behind the counter, slower than she expected. He limped a little on the left. I'm Wendell Doyle. Owned this store 40-some years. Knew your grandmother better than just about anybody. She never mentioned me, Lena said. It came out flat, defensive. Wendell took his glasses off, polished them on the corner of his shirt. Not in so many words, but she was always waiting, your grandmother. For something or someone. Mostly someone. He put the glasses back on. You look hungry. I'm fine. You look like you haven't eaten since Connecticut. She didn't answer. He reached behind the counter, came back with a paper bag, handed it to her. On the house, sandwich, apple, bottle of water, don't argue. She took it. She wanted to argue. She always argued. It was the muscle she'd built strongest. The I don't need anything from you muscle. the I take care of myself muscle. But her hand had already closed around the bag, and her stomach had already growled, and Wendell was already turning away to put another log in the wood stove. So she didn't argue. "How do I get to the property?" she asked. He didn't turn around. 3 miles up Ridge Road. Last place before the road dead ends at the old quarry. Can't miss it. I'll walk. Like hell you will. She blinked. He turned around. Sorry. Pardon my mouth. But it's 3 miles, snow's a foot deep on ridge, and you're wearing sneakers. Carl's plowing south of town till morning, so you'll wait here. I'll close up in an hour. I'll run you out myself. I don't... Eleanor would have my hide if I let her kin freeze. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. My grandmother's name was Margaret. A pause. A long one. Wendell looked at her. That's right, he said softly. That's what I meant. Margaret. And he turned back to the stove. But Lena had seen it. The flicker. The slip. The fact that he'd said Eleanor and meant it, and then had to walk it back. Filed it. The way she filed everything, under not enough to know yet. Don't let it show. She sat in the chair by the stove, ate the sandwich, egg salad. Real homemade egg salad. The kind you only got when somebody loved you. She didn't know who'd made it. She'd ask later, but she'd never ask. That was the kind of thing Lena did. She'd notice things she'd never bring up. She'd hold them. Quiet. The bell on the door rang. She didn't look up at first. Why would she? Then she felt it. The temperature in the room shifted. Not the air. Wendell's body language. He'd straightened behind the counter the way a dog straightens when something walks past the yard. She looked up. A man stood in the doorway. Black overcoat, black gloves, shoes that had no business in a Maine winter. His face was the kind of handsome that didn't warm anything. A handsome made of angles. His eyes landed on Lena and stayed there. "Miss Hartwell," he said, smooth, practiced. "I was hoping I'd find you." Wendell stepped out from behind the counter. Subtle, but he placed himself between her and the door. Pierce. Wendell. Girl just got off the bus. Of course. Garrett Pierce did not break eye contact with Lena. I wouldn't dream of crowding her. I just wanted to introduce myself in person. Garrett Pierce, Crane Industries. He extended a hand. She didn't take it. He smiled like he'd expected that and was pleased. "You received our letter, I take it." "I received it." "Then you understand. Our offer is straightforward. It's clean. The property is frankly a liability. The structure is unsound. The land is isolated. We're prepared to take it off your hands. Cash. By tomorrow afternoon, if you'd like." Lena set the half-eaten sandwich down on the napkin. "Why?" He blinked. "I'm sorry. Why does Crane Industries want a barn, a beat?" His smile did not move, but something behind it did. "Development," he said. "We have plans for the area. Recreational. A modest resort. Your property is positioned along a corridor we'd like to consolidate. For $8,000. Cash. For an acre. In its current condition, yes. We're being generous, Miss Hartwell. The state would charge you to demolish the existing structure. Lena tilted her head. Then why do you want it? The silence that followed had weight. Garrett Pierce's smile shifted, just slightly. The angle changed, like a door that had been almost shut opening 1 inch wider. Think it over, he said. He produced a card from his coat, set it on the counter without looking at it. We're not in a rush, but the offer doesn't stay on the table indefinitely. Properties like yours have unique maintenance challenges in winter. Pipes freeze, roofs collapse, liability accrues. I'd hate to see you tied up in something complicated. He met her eyes. Welcome to Stonebridge, Miss Hartwell. He nodded to Wendell, turned. The bell rang. The door closed. Lena stared at the card without picking it up. Wendell exhaled, long and slow. That man's smile, he said, is fake as a $3 bill. I noticed. He's been after that land 6-7 years now. Your grandmother wouldn't sell. Not for any price. Why does he want it so bad, Wendell looked at her. A long, weighted look. The kind of look that meant I could tell you, child, but you're not ready and I'm not the one. That, he said, is a longer conversation than tonight allows. He turned, started flipping the closed sign. Get your bag, kid. Let's get you home before that snow turns mean. His truck was older than she was. Rust along the wheel wells. The heater rattled like it was trying to start a fight with itself. They didn't talk much. The town fell away behind them. The road narrowed. The trees thickened. The plow had been through here, but barely. The truck slid once on a hairpin turn, and Wendell didn't even react. Just corrected. Kept going. She watched his hands on the wheel. Big hands. Knuckles thick. A pale gold wedding ring on the left. She wondered briefly where the wife was, whether she was still around. She didn't ask. Your grandmother was a good woman. He said it to the windshield, not to her. The town thought she was eccentric, a hermit. They didn't understand her, but she saw things other people didn't. She paid attention. A pause. She paid attention to you too, child. More than you know. Lena's throat closed. Just for a second. She did not respond. The truck slowed, crawled. And then he turned the wheel and the headlights swept over a clearing, and there it was. The barn. She'd pictured small. She'd pictured pathetic. It was neither. It was enormous. 2 stories of weathered gray wood. The kind of gray that takes 100 winters to make. The roof sagged in the middle. One of the big front doors hung crooked. A side door, smaller, looked solid enough. It wasn't a building. It was a creature. Sleeping. Patient. Wendell let the truck idle. This is it. She didn't move. You sure you want to do this tonight? You can stay at the inn. Mrs. Hadley's got a room. I'll bring you back in the morning. No. Lena, I want to see it. He sighed, reached behind the seat, came back with a kerosene lantern and a box of matches. Power's been off for years. No heat. There's old blankets in the trunk by the workbench. Use them. And there's wood for the stove. You know how to lay a fire. I'll figure it out." He looked at her. He looked at her for a long time. "You're more like her than you know," he said. "God help you." He pressed the lantern into her hands. "My number's on the door of the store. You get into any trouble. Day, night. Doesn't matter. You call. Hear me." "I hear you." She got out. He waited. She walked to the door, pulled the key from her pocket. The wind had picked up. Her fingers were numb. The lock was stiff. She thought for one cold, awful moment that the key wouldn't turn. Then a grinding mineral sound, like rocks waking up, and the bolt slid. She pushed the door. It groaned, open. Behind her, the truck's headlights swept across the front of the barn one last time. She heard Wendell back up the road, heard the engine fade, and then it was just her, and the dark, and whatever was inside. The lantern light made everything bigger and smaller at the same time. Bigger because the shadows stretched up into rafters she couldn't see. The barn was cavernous. 2-story vaulted the ceiling lost in darkness. To her left, old animal stalls. Wooden gates gray with time. To her right, shapes draped in canvas. The hump of a tractor. Stacks of lumber. A ladder leading up to a loft she could just barely glimpse. Smaller because the lantern light made a circle, and the circle was the only world. Step out of the circle and there was nothing. She set the lantern on a wooden crate. She closed the door behind her. The wind kept on outside. The barn breathed around her. Old wood, settling, sighing. Straight ahead against the far wall was a workbench. She walked to it. The lantern came with her, the light swinging. The bench was long, heavy, made of thick oak planks joined together. Tools hung on a pegboard above it, each one outlined in white paint where it should go. Wrenches, hammers, a small handsaw, jars on the shelf above labeled in tight, elegant handwriting, finishing nails, brass screws, brads. She ran her hand across the surface of the bench. The wood was scarred. 100 small nicks and scratches. Half a century of work. It was the cleanest part of the barn. Somebody had loved this bench. She set the lantern down on it. And there, tucked between 2 jars on the shelf above, a small tin box, the kind you might keep tea bags in, or biscuits. Painted with bluebirds, faded now, the blue gone to gray. Her grandmother had touched this box recently. The dust on it was thinner than the dust on everything else. She lifted it down. She sat on an overturned crate. She opened the lid. Inside, a bed of yellowed cotton, soft, old. On top of the cotton, one photograph, black and white, edges curled. A woman holding a baby. The woman had dark, wavy hair pulled back loose, a long face, a small smile. The kind of smile that was both shy and stubborn at the same time. She was wearing a cardigan hand-knit, the buttons mismatched. The baby was wrapped in a blanket, one small fist poking out from the wrap, eyes open, looking up at the woman. The woman was looking at the baby like the baby was the only thing in the world. Lena turned the photograph over. On the back, in that same elegant handwriting from the jar labels, Claire, 6 weeks. My whole heart. Claire. Her mother's name. She turned the photograph back over. She stared at her mother. She had never seen her mother as a baby, not once. There had been a few photographs in the apartment, but they were from later, much later. And the apartment had burned in the same fire that took everything else. And so there had been nothing. This was the first time she had ever seen her mother small. And the woman holding her. Lena looked at the woman's face, the mouth, the small smile. She looked at her own reflection in the dark glass of the lantern. Her own mouth, the same mouth. Something gave way in her chest, quietly, without a sound. She didn't cry, not yet. The crying would come later. Right now it was just this, just the looking, just the recognition. Margaret Hartwell had held her daughter the way Lena had always wanted to be held. And somewhere in the years and the silences between then and now, that hold had been broken. But the hand had reached out one more time. She'd left this where Lena would find it. She'd left this on purpose. Lena lifted the photograph carefully. Underneath the cotton, a folded piece of paper. She unfolded it. Same handwriting. My little bird, should you ever need to find your way home, the heart of the house is not in the house. It's where the work is done. Trust the grain. She read it 3 times, and then a 4th time slower. The heart of the house is not in the house. It was a riddle, a clue. Her grandmother hadn't left her with nothing. Her grandmother had left her a map. Hope, fragile and unfamiliar, flickered somewhere low in her chest. She looked around the barn, the lantern light, the shadows, the workbench beside her, where the work is done. She looked at the bench. She didn't know what she was looking for. Not yet. The riddle was too big, and her body was too tired and her hands were too cold. She would look in the morning. She would look when she had light. She found the blankets in the trunk Wendell had mentioned. Wool. Heavy. They smelled faintly of cedar. She didn't try to start a fire. She was too tired. The kerosene heater she'd seen in the corner had no kerosene. She'd deal with it tomorrow. She made a nest of the blankets in the corner near the workbench. She kept the lantern lit turned low. She kept the photograph in her hand. She lay down. The barn breathed around her. The wind worked at the cracks in the walls. Somewhere outside, snow fell against snow. She thought she would be afraid. She wasn't. She felt for the first time in 2 years that someone knew where she was, even if that someone was dead. She closed her eyes. The photograph was still in her hand. She slept. She woke to gray light through the cracks in the walls. For one disoriented second, she didn't know where she was. The smell of old wood, the cold air on her face, the weight of wool over her body. Then she remembered. She sat up. The lantern had burned out in the night. Her breath fogged in the air. She could see the rafters now vaguely. Dust motes hanging. She stood, stiff, every joint complaining. She looked at the workbench. In the daylight, it was less mysterious. Just a bench. Just old wood and old tools. But the photograph was still in her hand. She slid it into the inside pocket of the blue cardigan, which she'd put on sometime in the night without meaning to. She'd come back. She'd search every inch of this bench. But first, she needed coffee. She needed something hot. She wrapped the heaviest blanket around her like a shawl, pulled her sneakers back on, stepped outside. The world had been remade in the night, a foot of new snow. The trees bowed under it, the sky pale and high, the road a soft white ribbon. She started walking. Ruthie's diner had a pink neon sign that didn't quite work. The R flickered. The rest stayed steady. Lena pushed the door open and the bell rang. The diner was small. 6 booths along the window. A counter with 5 stools. A pie case turning slowly. It smelled like bacon and coffee and maple syrup and something sweeter underneath. Something fruity. Warm. 3 men sat at the counter. They looked up when she came in, looked at her, looked at each other, looked back at their plates. A woman came out from behind the counter, 65 maybe, silver hair pulled back in a low bun, a flour-dusted apron. Smile lines around her eyes, the way mountains have tree lines, the way they tell you everything you need to know about the weather. A place has lived through. She stopped when she saw Lena. She stopped completely. She put one hand on the counter to steady herself. "Oh," she said, softly, to herself. Lena hovered in the doorway. "Is the diner open?" "Yes, honey, yes, come in. Come on in out of the cold." She came in. The woman gestured to a booth by the window. The good one. The one with the heat vent under it. "Sit. I'll bring you coffee." Lena sat. She watched the woman move behind the counter. Slow, deliberate. Like she didn't trust her hands. She came back with a mug. White diner mug, thick. Steam curling. She set it down. She didn't leave. She stood at the edge of the table looking down at Lena like she was trying to memorize her. "You're Margaret's girl." It wasn't a question. "Granddaughter." "Yes." "I know." A breath. "I'm Ruth May. Ruth May Calloway. I own this place. She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I knew your grandmother. I knew her my whole life." Lena set the mug down. "I'd like to hear about her, if you have time. Honey." Ruth May's eyes were wet. She didn't bother to hide it. "I've got all the time in the world. But first, I'm gonna feed you. Because Margaret would never forgive me if I let you sit there hungry. I'm not really—" "Blueberry pancakes," Ruth May said. "It's all I make for breakfast in the wintertime. Frozen Maine blueberries. Plenty of butter. You'll eat them." "Okay." "Your mama loved blueberry pancakes when she was little." Lena went still. Ruth May held her gaze. "I made them for her. Right here in this kitchen. She used to sit at this exact booth with a coloring book." Lena's hand around the mug stopped working, stopped feeling. "My mother. Claire. You knew my mother. I changed her diapers, sweetheart. I held her the day after she came home from the hospital. Lena couldn't speak. Ruth May reached out, slow. She put her hand over Lena's. Her hand was warm and dry and old and steady. "I've been waiting for you," she said. "We all have. The ones of us still here. We've been waiting a long, long time." Then she turned, walked to the kitchen, wiped her eyes on her apron without slowing down. Lena sat in the booth. She held the warm mug in both hands, and for the first time since she could remember, she was not in a place. She was in a somewhere. Somewhere that had been waiting for her. Somewhere that knew her name before she'd said it. The pancakes came tall and golden with butter melting down the sides and warm blueberries breaking through the surface like little stars. Lena ate every bite. Ruth May sat across from her in the booth. She had her own coffee. She didn't talk while Lena ate. She just watched. The way grandmothers watch. When Lena set her fork down, Ruth May reached across the table and took the empty plate. "Better. Better. Good. Now, listen." She slid back into the booth, leaned forward. Her voice dropped. "That man yesterday, Garrett Pierce, Wendell told me he came in the store." "He did. He's going to come around again. He's going to be polite, and then less polite. He works for a man named Victor Crane. You're going to hear that name a lot in the next few days, honey. I need you to file it. Victor Crane is the reason you haven't seen Stonebridge before now. Victor Crane is the reason your grandmother lived the way she did at the end." Lena's stomach went tight. "Why? That's a longer story than this coffee allows." "Tell me anyway." Ruth May looked at her for a long moment. "You're like her, you know." You asked the way she asked, straight on with the chin up. "Tell me anyway." "I will, but not all today. Today I want you to do one thing. Promise me one thing." "What?" "You walk over to the post office. After breakfast, you go see Lillian Ashby." "Who?" "Postmistress. 70 years old. Ornery as a mule and twice as smart. She's got something for you. Something she's been holding for a long, long time." "What is it?" "Not my place to say." "Ruth May, go see Lillian." Lena looked at her. Ruth May's eyes were not soft anymore. They were level, steady. The look of a woman who had once held a baby and now was holding something else. "Okay. Good girl." Ruth May reached out, tucked a piece of Lena's hair behind her ear. The gesture was so casual, so familiar, so motherly that Lena almost flinched. She did not flinch. She let herself be touched. The post office was 2 doors down. A small brick building, a single counter, a wall of brass mailboxes behind the counter, the kind with little glass windows and combination dials. The bell on the door was different from the general stores, higher, sharper. A woman stood behind the counter sorting mail, tall, thin, white hair cropped short, a face like a hawk that had decided not to bother lying about being a hawk. She did not look up. "Be with you in a moment." She finished the stack she was on, set it down, looked up. Her face did something complicated. She set both hands flat on the counter. "Well," she said. "You came." Lena swallowed. "Lillian Ashby." "That's me." Ruth May sent me. I know she did. She called from the diner the minute you walked out. Oh. Lillian's gaze did not leave her face. You don't look much like Margaret. Not in the bones, but the eyes. The eyes are her exactly. People keep saying that. People keep being right. Lillian turned away from the counter, walked to a back room. Lena could hear drawers opening and closing, then a small, dry sound like cardboard against cardboard. Lillian came back. She was carrying a box, wooden, about the size of a shoebox, the kind of box you might keep recipes in. Hand-painted on the lid was a small bird, a bluebird, faded now. The same bird as the tin box on the workbench. She set it on the counter. She slid it across. This is for you. Lena did not touch it. What is it? Open it. Lena looked at her. Lillian's hawk face had not changed, but her voice had. Her voice had gone soft. Open it, child. Lena lifted the lid. Inside, letters, stacked, thick, tied with a soft white ribbon. She lifted the top one out. It was addressed to her. Lena Hartwell. The handwriting she now knew. The same elegant script as the jar labels, as the note in the tin box. The address on the front was the apartment where she had lived with her parents, the one that had burned. The envelope had a postmark. It also had a red stamp across the front. Return to sender. No such addressee. She turned it over. She set it down. She picked up the next one. Same. Different year. Different address. The first foster placement. Her name. Same red stamp. The third. The fourth. Different addresses. The names of homes she had lived in. Names she had tried to forget. Stonebridge House. The Bridgewater. The Caroline Center. Different years. Different ages. All marked return to sender. All in Margaret's handwriting. All unopened. Lena counted them. There were 18. 18. One for every year of her life. Her hands started to shake. She wrote me, Lena whispered. Every year, honey. Every single birthday. I never got any of these. I know. I thought she didn't. I thought she didn't care. I know. Somebody sent them back. Somebody made sure you'd never get them. Somebody told your homes she was a danger to you. A confused, troubled old woman. Somebody had connections in the system that should have been protecting you, and used those connections to make sure you'd grow up believing you were alone in the world. Lena's breath had gone ragged. She could not look up. She had spent 2 years believing her grandmother had simply not wanted her, that nobody had wanted her, that she was an unclaimed thing drifting through a system that processed her like paperwork. And the entire time, somebody had been sitting in a small post office in a small town in Maine, taking these letters back from the postman and putting them in a box, because she was the kind of woman who couldn't bring herself to throw them away. Why did you keep them? Lena asked. Lillian's voice was very quiet now. Because Margaret asked me to. The first one came back, and she came in here, and she stood right where you're standing. She said, Lillian, hold on to these. Don't burn them. One day she'll come. One day she'll come, and she'll need to know. Lena's vision had gone wet. She knew I'd come. She knew. She didn't always know how. She didn't always know when. But she knew. Lena reached out, touched the stack of letters with 2 fingers. They were not warm. They were just paper. But they were the closest thing to a held hand she had ever owned. She walked back to the barn carrying the box. She did not feel the cold. She did not feel her own feet. She felt only the weight of the wooden box in her arms. The snow had stopped. The sun was a pale disk behind thin clouds. Crows called somewhere in the pines. She walked the 3 miles in something like a trance. She did not open the letters yet. She knew without thinking about it that she could not open them outside. They needed walls. When she reached the barn, she pushed the door open with her shoulder. She set the box on the workbench. She stood there, looking at it, where the work is done. Trust the grain. The phrase came back to her. She had been told to trust the grain. She looked down at the workbench, the thick oak, the flowing pattern of dark and light lines in the wood. She had looked at it last night with a lantern and seen nothing. Now she looked at it in the gray daylight from the open door. She ran her hand along the surface, slow. She knelt down, looked at the legs. The legs were thick, heavy, each one made of several pieces of laminated oak. The grain flowed down them beautiful and clean, except on the front left leg. On that one leg halfway down, the grain didn't quite match. A subtle break, almost invisible. The kind of thing you wouldn't see if you weren't looking. She was looking. She ran her thumb along it, felt the faint seam. And there, in the middle of the mismatched section, a knot in the wood, no bigger than the pad of her thumb, a small dark swirl. Trust the grain. She pressed it. Click. A panel popped open. A section of the bench leg. Not a drawer. A hidden compartment, carved straight into the solid wood. Inside, heavy, leather. She reached in. She pulled it out. A journal. Brown leather cover, worn soft at the corners. A leather thong wrapped around it twice. She sat down on the cold, packed earth floor of the barn. She set the journal across her knees. She unwrapped the thong. She opened the cover. The first page. The same handwriting. The same elegant, spidery script. My little bird, my Claire, you arrived today. A screaming, beautiful miracle. Holding you, I feel like I finally understand what the sun is for. You are everything. Lena closed the cover. She held the journal against her chest. She was not ready to read it yet. But she would. She would read every word. She would learn her mother as a baby. She would learn her grandmother as a young woman. She would learn the woman who had written 18 letters to a girl who had never received them. Outside, the wind moved through the pines. Inside, Lena sat on the dirt floor of the barn, the journal pressed to her chest. The box of letters on the workbench above her, the photograph of her mother as a baby still tucked in the pocket of the blue cardigan. She was not alone. She had never been alone. She had only believed that she was. She opened her eyes. She took a breath. She began to read. She read until the lantern ran out of oil. Then she found another can in the supplies Wendell had left at the door, refilled the lantern, and kept reading. She read sitting on the dirt floor with her back against the workbench. She read with the blanket wrapped around her. She read with her shoulders aching and her eyes burning and her hands so cold. She had to stop every 20 pages to hold them under her armpits until the feeling came back. She did not stop because her grandmother was here, right here, in the ink, in the careful loops of every letter, in the small drawings in the margins, the way Margaret would sketch a chickadee on a feeder, or a sprig of lavender, or the curve of a baby's ear. This wasn't a journal. This was a woman. The first 100 pages were Claire. Claire as a newborn. Claire learning to crawl. Claire saying bird and pointing at the ceiling. Claire at 3 asleep in a pile of leaves Margaret had raked her cheek pink against the brown. Claire at 6 demanding to ride a tractor. Claire at 8 asking why people died. Lena read about her mother the way some people read love letters from a person they never got to meet. Because that was what it was, a love letter, decades long, written by a mother to a daughter, never expecting that one day the daughter's daughter would be the one to read it. She learned things she had never known, that her mother had been left-handed, that her mother had broken her arm at 9 falling out of an apple tree, that her mother had wanted to be a marine biologist until she was 12, and then a poet until she was 14, and then nothing in particular after that, because the world had started getting smaller around her, in a way Margaret had noticed and recorded with rising alarm. Because around the time Claire was 16, the entries changed. Not all at once. Slowly. A new word started showing up in Margaret's careful script. Calvin. Calvin made Claire laugh at first. That was the first thing Margaret wrote about him. Calvin makes Claire laugh. He has a charm to him. A fire. I hope it's the warming kind, not the burning kind. Lena stopped at that line. Calvin. She had not known her father's name as anything but Dad. A small word. A whole-mouth word. The word a child uses without thinking until the word is gone, and then it becomes the heaviest word in the language. Calvin. She tried it in her mouth. Silent. Her father had been a Calvin. It made him smaller somehow, more human. A man with a name. The entries got shorter. Calvin lost another job. He blames the foreman. Claire is getting thin. The light is going out of her eyes. She had a bruise on her arm today. She said she walked into a door. Lena had to put the journal down. She had to. Because some part of her had known this. Had always known this. The shouting late at night. The way her mother flinched when her father came in slamming the front door. The way Claire would close her bedroom door when her father came home with that smell on him. The cheap whiskey smell. And Lena would lie in her bed with the pillow over her ears. Walked into a door. She had heard that one too. She had heard it about her mother. And once when she was 10 about herself. She picked the journal back up. She kept reading. Because her grandmother had wanted her to know. Claire told Margaret she was pregnant on a Tuesday in October. Lena was the pregnancy. Lena was the baby. Lena, the small bird, who would not yet have a name for another 5 months. Margaret's entry from that day was the only entry in the journal where her handwriting shook. Claire is pregnant, she told me today. Her eyes were shining. She thinks a baby will fix him. I know it will only give him another soul to break. I have to do something. I cannot let him destroy this child too. Lana ran her finger over the wobble in the letters. She had been afraid of her father. She had been afraid of him before she had even been born. And her grandmother had been afraid for her. The entries got desperate after that. Margaret began to sell things, pieces of equipment, a coin collection that had belonged to her own mother. She was saving money. She was preparing a way out for Claire and the baby. But Calvin had started moving them, from apartment to apartment, from town to town. He cut Claire off from phones, from mail, from anything that might be a way home. And then in the middle of the Save Money campaign, the journal mentioned a new name. Victor Crane. Lena's whole body went cold. She set the journal down. She picked up the lantern. She walked the perimeter of the barn. She did it twice. She needed her body to move because her mind was moving in circles, and she had to get out of the loop. Victor Crane, the man Ruth May had warned her about, the man Garrett Pierce worked for, the man whose company wanted this barn. She came back. She sat down. She picked the journal up. She kept reading. Calvin owed Victor Crane a lot of money. Margaret had pieced it together the way Margaret pieced everything together. Slowly. Patiently. By paying attention. Crane had been a small-town loan shark before he was a developer. He had given money to Calvin years before, back when Calvin and Claire were first married. Calvin had not been able to pay it back. The interest had compounded. The compound had become a chain. Crane used the chain. He had Calvin run errands, intimidate people, make phone calls, drop packages at addresses without asking what was in them. Calvin did all of it because the alternative was Claire. And then Crane started looking at the barn. The barn was in Margaret's name. Margaret would not sell it. Crane wanted it. So Crane began pressuring Calvin to pressure Claire to pressure Margaret. Margaret wrote about a single visit Crane paid her. He had come in a black car. He had smiled like a salesman. He had offered a price for the land, and Margaret had laughed. He told me I was making a mistake. I told him I had been making mistakes for 60 years, and this was not going to be one of them. He smiled again and said, "I always get what I want, Mrs. Hartwell." I told him to get off my property. Lina read that line and felt her grandmother stand up inside her chest. She kept reading. The entries got short again. They got short the way breath gets short. Calvin came by today. Claire was not with him. He told me to sell. He told me people would get hurt. I told him to leave. I have not seen Claire in 11 weeks. I do not know if my granddaughter is alive. Lana turned 3 today. I sent the letter. I always send the letter. I do not know if she has ever received one. Calvin is going to break. I can feel it. Lana flipped forward. Her hands had gone numb again. She knew what was coming. She had known since she was 16 and had stood beside 2 closed caskets and had not been allowed to look inside because the funeral director had said very gently that this was not the kind of accident she would want to see. She turned the page. Sarah and Calvin are dead. Margaret had written it across the top of the page. Just that. No other words. The rest of the page was blank. Wait. Sarah Lena read it again. Sarah and Calvin. She frowned. Her mother's name was Claire. The whole journal had been about Claire. She flipped back a page. Margaret had written Claire. She flipped back 2 pages. Claire. 3 pages. Claire. Then this page. Sarah. The handwriting on the Sarah and Calvin are dead page was different. Sharper. Faster. The kind of writing you do when your hand has stopped being a hand and has become a thing that just moves. Grief did that. Grief could turn a name you'd written 10,000 times into the wrong name for one terrible minute. Grief could make a mother forget her own daughter for the length of one sentence because her brain was trying to protect her by being someone else. Lena stared at the page. Sarah and Calvin are dead. Then 2 pages later, the handwriting steady again. My Claire is gone. So her grandmother had broken in that moment, briefly. The way a piece of wood under too much weight will split before it falls. And then she had picked herself up and gone on writing. Lena's eyes were burning. She turned the page. The accident. Margaret had written about the accident the way a detective would have written about it, because Margaret had not believed it. Black ice on Route 9. That was what they told me. The car went off the shoulder and into the ravine. Single vehicle. No other cars involved. They will not let me see the bodies. Lena was not in the car. I have been calling for 2 days to find out where Lena is. The state has her. They will not tell me anything because of an active investigation. They tell me she's fine. They tell me she was at a friend's house when it happened. She was 16 years old and at a friend's house. My granddaughter is alive. I am going to fight for her. The next 10 pages were the fight. Margaret writing letters. Margaret calling lawyers. Margaret driving to Hartford in a borrowed car. Margaret showing up at the courthouse with documents and being told to come back tomorrow. Margaret figuring out slowly that something was wrong. The caseworker assigned to Lena would not return her calls. The state's family services director was the same man whose company had received a sudden capital investment 3 months ago. The investment had come from a holding company. The holding company traced back eventually to Crane Industries. He has people in the system. He has made sure I will not get to her. He has painted me as an unstable old woman with a history of erratic behavior. He will keep Lena from me because he believes that if Lena grows up alone and desperate, she will be easy to manipulate when the inheritance becomes hers. He is right about the desperation. He is wrong about the easy. I will not stop. But I will also be smart. If I cannot reach her with my voice, I will reach her with my work. I will build her a road home. I will leave it where only she could find it. I will trust that the daughter of my Claire is the granddaughter of me and that some things travel down the bones. Lena pressed the journal closed against her chest. She rocked just slightly, just once. That was her grandmother, a woman who, when the world took her daughter and stole her granddaughter, did not collapse, did not surrender, did not even really get angry. She got patient. She got strategic. She got to work. There was more. Of course there was more. The journal was thick. Margaret had kept it for years after the accident, but Lena's eyes were swimming. Her body was shutting down. She had not slept properly in 2 days, and she had been crying for hours without entirely noticing. She needed to stop. She marked her place with a piece of the leather thong. She wrapped the journal back up. She tucked it inside the blue cardigan against her body, where she could feel the weight of it. She stood up. Her legs almost did not work. She steadied herself on the workbench. Lena reached out and laid her palm against the bench. The wood felt warm under her hand, which was impossible. The barn was not heated, but it felt warm. She kept her hand there until the feeling went away. Then she went outside into the gray afternoon and started walking back to town. She needed to eat. She needed to sleep. She needed to think. And she needed to find a man named Owen Walsh. Ruthie's diner was empty when she pushed the door open. Empty except for Ruth May behind the counter rolling pie crust. Ruth May looked up. She set the rolling pin down, slow. She looked at Lena's face. She came around the counter without saying anything. She took Lena by the elbow. She walked her to the booth by the heat vent. She sat her down. She slid in across from her. She waited. Lena tried to speak. She couldn't. The first sound came out wrong, a small wet noise that wasn't a word. Ruth May did not flinch. "You read the journal?" Lena nodded. "All of it. Up to the accident." "Oh, honey." "My father." Lena's voice cracked. He was trying to get her out. He wasn't. The accident wasn't. It wasn't. She couldn't finish. Ruth May waited. Lena tried again. He was driving them out of state. The night it happened. He was getting them away from Crane. My grandmother wrote it down. She figured it out. He was scared. He was trying to save them. He died trying to save them, and you hated him. Lena looked down at the table. For 2 years, I hated him. I told myself the world was better without him. Ruth May reached across the table. She took both of Lena's hands in hers. "Listen to me, sweetheart. You listen to me real good." Lena listened. "Your father was not a good man. Not all the time. He hurt your mother. He hurt you probably in ways you remember and ways you don't. None of that goes away because he was scared at the end. None of it gets erased." A breath. But, he died trying to do the right thing. The very last thing he did was try to save his wife and his daughter. And you are a loud child. You are allowed to hold 2 things at once. You are allowed to grieve what he did, and you are allowed to grieve what he was trying to do. Those 2 things can sit in the same chest at the same time. People do it every day. Lena was crying now, openly. Not the silent, swallowed kind she'd been doing all afternoon. The other kind. The kind that came up out of the floor of her. Ruth May did not move. Ruth May held her hands. "Cry it out, sweetheart. Cry it out. There is no rush. The world will wait." When the crying stopped, Lena's head felt like a bowl of warm water. She felt empty in a clean way, scraped out. Ruth May had not moved. Better, a little. Drink this. She had set a mug of something in front of Lena. Lena hadn't even seen her do it. What is it? Hot apple cider with a knob of butter melted in it. Old farm trick. Take the chill out of anything. Lena took a sip. It was the most comforting thing she had ever put in her mouth. She started crying again, but quietly this time, just leaking. The way old houses leak. Ruth May let her. After a while, Lena wiped her face on her sleeve. Ruth May. Yes, honey. How did you know my grandmother? Ruth May took a long breath. She looked out the window, across Main Street, at the lights coming on in the hardware store. Margaret and I were friends from the year I was 11 and she was 12. She moved to Stonebridge with her people when her father took over the old Pratt farm. She walked into the schoolhouse with a thick wool coat and no friends and bangs that her mother had cut crooked. I sat with her at lunch. That was it. From that day forward, Lena watched her. We grew up in each other's kitchens. We were each other's bridesmaids. We helped each other raise our girls. My Annie, her Claire. Annie, a name Lena did not know. But Ruth May had said it like a sound she had carried in her mouth for a long, long time. Your Annie, Lena said, carefully. Ruth May did not look away from the window. My Annie passed 8 years ago. She was a young woman, 23. I'm so sorry. Don't be. Just listen. Lena listened. Annie lived out by the quarry in a little cabin she'd bought for nothing and was fixing up with her hands. She drank the well water. We all did out there. Margaret drank it too until Margaret started catching trucks at the quarry late at night. Margaret stopped drinking the well water then. She told me to stop too. Told everyone she could. But my Annie was stubborn. My Annie said her mother was paranoid. 2 years later, the doctors found cancer in her in 3 places. Ruth May finally looked back at Lena. Crane took my daughter. Slowly. With the trucks, he ran into that quarry. The same trucks your grandmother photographed. The same trucks your grandmother kept evidence on for the last years of her life, waiting for someone who could carry it the rest of the way. Lena could not breathe. Ruth May. He didn't just take your mother, baby. He didn't just take your father. He took mine, too. He has been taken from this town for a long time, and we have all of us, every single one of us, been too afraid or too tired or too broke to stop him. Why didn't you tell anyone? Honey, a small, bitter laugh. I did. I told everyone who would listen for the first 2 years. And then I noticed my cousin's grocery store burned to the ground in an unexplained fire. And then I noticed my nephew lost his job at the county. And then a man came into this diner on a Tuesday afternoon and ate a piece of pie, and looked at me very politely over the top of his coffee and said, Ruth May, you've got such a lovely place here. Pity if anything happened to it. That man was Garrett Pierce. He still works for Crane. He came in here yesterday after you walked out. Sat at the counter. Ordered nothing. Looked at me. Left. Lena's chest had gone tight again. He's threatening you. He's reminding me. Ruth May. I should have told you the minute you walked through that door yesterday. I didn't. Because I was scared. And because I had made a promise to your grandmother. She said, Ruth May, when she comes, don't crush her. Feed her first. Tell her one thing at a time. Ruth May's eyes were wet now. I made her a promise. I have kept it. I am telling you the truth now because the time has come. You are sitting here in front of me. You are 18 years old. And you are not alone, honey. You are not alone. You have never been alone. I have watched you from 1,000 miles away your whole life, and I have prayed for you every single night. And I have written your name on the prayer list at the church, even when I had not heard it spoken in years. Lena was crying again. So was Ruth May. The diner was empty. The pink neon sign flickered. Outside, snow had started coming down again. They sat there for a long time. Just two women holding hands across a formica table in a small diner in a small town in Maine. It was, Lena would think later, the closest she had ever been to having a grandmother. That night, Ruth May brought her chicken soup at the barn. She drove out herself, in an old Jeep with a plow on the front. Brought a hot pot wrapped in towels. Brought bread. Brought a thermos of tea. Brought a quilt, hand-stitched blue and white squares that she said had been on her own bed for a long, long time and was too good not to be used. She also brought knitting. She sat on a crate beside the kerosene heater she had fixed for Lena while Lena ate the soup and she knitted. Click, click, click. The needles moved in her hands without her looking at them. Pale gray yarn. A scarf, maybe. Or a hat. Lena ate the soup with both hands wrapped around the bowl. Ruth May. You don't have to stay. I'm not staying. I'm sitting. There's a difference. Okay. Click. 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 The barn felt different with another person in it. Smaller. Warmer. The shadows had stopped being shadows. They were just dark places that would have light tomorrow. Lena finished the soup. She set the bowl down. She watched Ruth May knit for a long time. Did you ever knit for my mother? Honey, I knit Claire her first sweater. She wore it till her arms came out the cuffs at the elbow. I don't have anything of hers. A pause in the clicking. I know. Just the cardigan she was wearing. It was the only thing they gave back. I know that too. Wendell told me. Click, click, click. There's a room upstairs, Ruth May said. Up in the loft. Margaret kept it. After Claire left. It's hers. It's just been waiting. Why don't you go look at it in the morning? Lena's throat closed. Okay. Don't open it tonight. Tonight you sleep. You're not going to be ready for it tonight. How do you know? Because I've walked into rooms like that one before. You'll know when you can. You'll know when you can't. Tonight you can't. She set the knitting down. She stood up. She put both hands on Lena's shoulders. Sleep, baby. Tomorrow's tomorrow. She left. Lena listened to the Jeep go down the road. She lay down under Ruth May's quilt. The kerosene heater hummed. She slept. In the morning, she climbed the ladder to the loft. She had told herself she would not. She had told herself she would wait. She had told herself Ruth May was right. She climbed anyway, because she could not climb. The loft was small. 2 windows, a low ceiling. Half of it stacked with old hay, dry as paper, now smelling sweet. The other half walled off into a small room with a closed door. The door had a wooden knob shaped like a tulip. Lena stood in front of the door for a long time. Then she turned the knob. The door opened. It was a bedroom. It was a girl's bedroom. A narrow bed, iron frame, made up with a white quilt and a single pillow. A small braided rug on the wooden floor. A nightstand with a kerosene lamp. A child-sized rocking chair in the corner. The kind grandparents make in workshops. A bookshelf along one wall. Picture books. A few chapter books. A worn copy of Charlotte's Web. A copy of Anne of Green Gables with a cracked spine. On the dresser, a porcelain doll, old, cracked along one cheek. Eyes that had once been blue and were now milky. On the wall above the bed, a framed pencil drawing of a girl with 2 braids smiling, her hands held out towards something just out of the frame. The drawing was signed in the corner. Claire, aged 9. Lena stood in the doorway. She did not go in. She could not yet. It was her mother's room. Margaret had kept it. For decades, Margaret had kept her daughter's room as it had been, even after Claire had grown up, even after Claire had left, even after Claire had died, even when Margaret had known by then that the daughter was not coming back, that the granddaughter could not get past whatever wall Crane had built. She had still kept the room, because the kind of love Margaret Hartwell had given was not a love that needed an audience. It was a love that simply was, maintained like a house, repaired like a roof. Lena stepped into the room. She crossed it slowly. She stopped at the bed. She sat down on the edge of it. The mattress sighed beneath her. The springs were old. She looked around. She let her eyes touch everything. The doll, the books, the rocking chair, the drawing. Under the pillow. She would not have looked, except there was a small bulge under the pillow. Not square, not flat. A familiar shape. She lifted the pillow. A second journal, smaller than her grandmother's, cloth-bound, a faded yellow. The kind a teenage girl might buy with her allowance. The front cover had a name written on it in pencil. The pencil had faded almost to nothing. Claire Hartwell, age 16. Lena's mother's diary, the year before her mother had met her father. The year before everything started going wrong. Lena pressed her hand flat against the cover. She did not open it. Not yet. She put it inside the blue cardigan against her body, on top of the place where she could feel her own heart. And she walked back down the ladder, and she sat at the workbench, and she breathed for a long time. She had not been ready. Ruth May had been right. She was not ready now. But she had it. She had it now. The diary of her mother as a teenage girl, before she had been broken. She had the photograph. She had the journal. She had the 18 letters. She had a room in a loft that had been waiting. She was finding her mother in pieces. The way you find an old painting in an attic. You take off one cover, and there is another underneath. Owen Walsh's law office was wedged between the hardware store and the diner, a small wooden shingle painted in faded gold. Walsh and Walsh Attorneys at Law. The second Walsh had been painted over once, and then repainted the new paint slightly fresher than the rest. A father's name kept on a son's door. The bell, when she pushed it open, was small, cheerful. The room behind the door was warm. It smelled of old books and brewing coffee. A man was at the desk, early 30s, a rumpled gray suit, dark hair too long for it, a face that looked like it forgot to be impressed with itself. He looked up. He looked at her. He stood up so fast, he nearly tipped his coffee mug. "You're her." "Excuse me, you're—" He caught himself. He sat back down. He took a breath. He stood up again. He came around the desk. "Forgive me, I'm sorry. I'm Owen Walsh. I've been waiting for you. I didn't know if— Please sit. May I take your coat?" Lena did not take off her coat. She did sit. He sat across from her, hands flat on the desk. He looked at her like she might disappear if he blinked. "My grandmother told you I'd come. She told me a long time ago. She told my father longer ago than that." "Your father?" He nodded. He glanced over at a framed photograph on the wall. A man in a courtroom. Tall, lean gray hair, the same long face Owen had. The man had his hand on the shoulder of a younger man. The younger man was unmistakably Owen, maybe a decade younger than now. Both of them smiling. "My father was Edward Walsh. He practiced law in this town for over 40 years. He took on Victor Crane long before I was old enough to understand what that meant. He fought him in zoning court, in environmental court, in 2 civil suits. He was building a federal case when he died." Lena felt the ground tilt slightly. "How did he die?" Owen looked at her. He did not soften it. "His car went off Route 9 in a snowstorm. Black ice. No other cars involved. Single vehicle accident." The ground stopped tilting and went somewhere else entirely. "Route 9? Yes. My parents." "I know." The silence between them was the kind of silence that has its own weight. "How long ago?" Lena asked. "More than 20 years. I was 10. He let it sit. He let her do the math. He let her understand that this was a pattern. That Route 9 had been used before. That Victor Crane had a way of dealing with people who did not get out of his way. "My grandmother, she knew," Owen said. "She always knew about my father. She came to the house the night of the accident. She sat with my mother. She was the one who told me years later that it had not been an accident. She was the one who told me what my father had been working on." He took a breath. "She told me when I went to law school that there would come a day. A young woman would walk into this office. A young woman with her eyes. She told me what to do when that day came." "Which is what?" Owen Walsh looked at her. "Everything she could not do alone." She told him. She told him about the letter from Crane Industries, about Garrett Pierce, about the journal, about Calvin trying to save her mother and her, about Ruth May and her Annie, about the 18 letters, about the loft. She did not tell him about the second journal, the one in her cardigan. That was hers. Owen took notes. He did not interrupt. He did not say "poor thing" or "how awful" or any of the things people said. He listened the way her grandmother had written, carefully, with his whole face. When she was done, he leaned back. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at her. "I'm going to ask you something I need you to answer honestly." "Okay." "Your grandmother left you a way out. She told me there would be money in the safe under the floor of the workshop. A great deal of money. Enough for you to walk away tomorrow. To start somewhere new. She wanted me to make sure you knew that was on the table. She wanted me to make sure you didn't feel obligated." "Okay. So, do you want to take the money and go?" Lena looked at him. She was 18 years old. She was so tired she could feel it in her bones. She had not had a steady home in 2 years. She had not had a stable adult in her life in 2 years. She had spent 2 days in this town, and she had cried more in those 2 days than in the last 24 months combined. She thought about the photograph in her pocket. She thought about her mother's room in the loft. She thought about 18 letters in a wooden box. She thought about Ruth May's hands holding hers across a formica table. She thought about her father driving his family through a snowstorm in the last hour of his life, trying finally to do the right thing. She thought about her grandmother, a woman she would never meet. A woman who had built her a road 1 stone at a time for 18 years on the chance that Lena might one day find her way to the first stone and follow it. She said, "No." Owen Walsh did not smile. He nodded once, slowly. The nod of a man who had been told the answer he had hoped for and feared. "Okay," he said. "Then let's go to work." She went back to the barn that night and read by lantern light until midnight. The journal again. Margaret's journal. She picked up where she had left off after the accident, after Sarah, which meant Claire after the funeral she had not been allowed to attend. The middle pages were the years Lena had been in the system. Margaret's failed attempts to find her contact, her right to her. The letters going out, the letters coming back. Then, on a page near the end, the handwriting changed. It got fainter, shakier. "The doctor saw me today. 2 tumors, pancreas and liver. He says a year, maybe 2 if I am stubborn. I told him I would not take the treatment." Lena stopped. She read the line again. "I told him I would not take the treatment." She had thought all this time that her grandmother had been sick at the very end, that she had died of an old woman's death, a quiet, ordinary one. She had not. She had refused treatment years before her death. Lena turned the page. "The treatment is expensive. I have what I have saved. I have the land. I have what is in the safe. I have time, not much, but enough. If I spend the money on the treatment, Lena will inherit nothing. The land will be eaten by medical debt. Crane will get what he wanted by waiting me out. He will get the property in foreclosure, and Lena will get nothing. If I spend the money on her, I will spend less time. But she will have a home. She will have the evidence. She will have a way to fight him. I have made my choice. I do not regret it. I will not regret it." Lena was holding the lantern. Her hand was shaking. The light on the page was jumping. She set the lantern down. She read the rest by the wobbling light. Margaret had bought herself time. She had spent the time tightening her case, photographing trucks at the quarry late at night, even when she could barely walk to her car, mailing copies of documents to herself certified so the postmarks would prove the dates, hiding things in places only the right person would find. She had spent her last years not dying. She had spent her last years making sure Lena had a chance. The final entry was dated 6 months before. The handwriting was almost unreadable. The pen had slipped in a few places. My little bird, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you have come and the road I built held. I am sorry I never held you. I am sorry I never made you blueberry pancakes, the way Ruth May used to make them for your mother. I am sorry I never braided your hair or told you my mother's stories or showed you which birds come back in the spring. I am sorry I am asking you with my last breath to fight a fight that should have been mine to finish. I am not sorry I loved you. I have loved you every day of your life. I have spoken your name into rooms where no one heard it. I have set a place at my table for you in my mind every Christmas, every Easter, every birthday, every ordinary Tuesday. I have made room for you in my own death by refusing to let it have me until I had built you a way home. The foundation is everything. What is built on stone will stand. What is built on lies will fall. He built his empire on lies. I built my house on stone. Find the safe. The combination is your mother's birthday. Take what is inside. Then choose. Whatever you choose, I am proud of you. You are a Hartwell. We are not defined by what is taken from us. We are defined by what we choose to protect. Your loving grandmother, Maggie. Lena closed the journal. She held it against her chest. She did not cry. She had cried herself out for the night. There were no tears left. She just sat there, holding her grandmother, through the leather, through years of ink, through the cold air of the barn and the warm hum of the kerosene heater. Tomorrow she would find the safe. Tomorrow she would open it. Tomorrow she would choose. Tonight she would sit in the dark of the barn with the journal pressed to her chest, and she would say quietly into the lantern light the words her grandmother had been waiting 18 years to hear. I'm here. The lantern flickered just once, as if in answer, and then it steadied, and it held. She woke before dawn. Not slowly, not the way you wake when the night has been gentle. She woke all at once, eyes open, heart already moving. Like her body had been waiting for permission. The kerosene heater was still humming. The barn was still cold. The light through the cracks in the wall was the gray blue of just before morning. The hour the deer move. She sat up. She wrapped Ruth May's quilt around her shoulders. She put her hand on her chest. The journal was still there inside the cardigan, warm now from her body. The little bluebird in the photograph she had tucked beside it. The yellow cloth diary of her mother's 16th year. She had carried all 3 of them through the night. She had not let go. She stood up. She lit the lantern. She walked to the back wall of the barn, to the small walled-off room, the one with the workbench outside it, the one Margaret had called the workshop in the journal. The floor inside was flagstone. Granite blocks set tight the cracks between them, mortared with something old and dark. The foundation is everything. Lina went down on her hands and knees. She started at the corner. She crawled. She tapped each stone with the iron handle of the pry bar she'd found on the bench. She listened. Thud, thud, thud. Solid. She crawled to the middle of the room. She tapped. The sound was different, not quite hollow, but thinner. The kind of difference only a body looking for a difference would catch. She held the lantern close. There, on one edge of the stone, a chip. A tiny, deliberate-looking chip. The shape of a crescent moon no bigger than her smallest fingernail. A signature. Her grandmother's mark. She slid the pry bar into the seam. She leaned on it. She put all of her 18-year-old body into the lever. Nothing. Until something gave. A grinding deep in the stone. Like teeth releasing. The flagstone began to lift. It was heavy. Heavier than she could pull alone. She put the bar down. She got down lower. She got her hands underneath. She pulled. The stone came up. Slow. Stubborn. The way every important thing in her life had ever come. She slid it sideways, set it down on the floor next to the hole. She held the lantern over the cavity. Beneath the stone, lined in metal, a safe, a small one, painted gray, combination dial in the center. On top of the safe, a sealed envelope, her name on it, Lina. Her hands started shaking before she even reached for it. She did not open the envelope yet. She knelt on the cold floor and she breathed and she steadied her hands. And then she turned to the safe and put her fingers on the dial. Her mother's birthday. She had not said the date out loud in 2 years. She had not let herself say it. To say it would have been to admit again that her mother was not there. To hear her say it. September 4th. The numbers came back to her hands before they came back to her mouth. 9. 4. The year 2 digits at the end. Right to 9. Left past 0 around to 4. Right to 73. 73. She heard the bolts retract before she felt them. A soft, mechanical thunk. She opened the door. Inside, 2 things. On the left, a metal cash box. The kind they used to keep at 5 and dimes. The lid was not locked. She lifted it. Inside, bills. Hundreds. Stacked. Banded. She did not count it. She did not have to. She knew. $60,000. Maybe more. She would learn later it was $62,000. Her grandmother had been pulling cash out of small accounts for 2 years in small enough amounts not to trigger flags, hiding it inch by inch the way a person fills a jar with rainwater. On the right, a waterproof portfolio. Black, thick, bound with a single rubber band. She did not open it. Not yet. She lifted both out. She set them on the workbench. Then she opened the envelope. She read the letter. She read it twice. By the second time, she was crying so hard she could not see the words anymore. And so she stopped reading and she let the letter rest in her lap. And she said into the dim of the barn out loud, "Okay, Maggie, okay, I hear you." It was the first time she had called her grandmother by her name. It was also the moment Lena Hartwell stopped being a girl alone in a barn. It was the moment she became something else. Owen Walsh opened his office door at 6:30 in the morning to find her standing on his doorstep with the portfolio under her arm. He took one look at her. "You opened it." "I opened it." "Come in." She came in. He locked the door behind her. He flipped the closed sign to face the street. He pulled the shade. He gestured her to his desk. She set the portfolio on the wood. She slid it across. He opened it. She watched his face. She watched a man read in real time a case file he had been waiting to read his entire adult life. His hands moved through the documents slowly, then faster, then slowly again the way a man's hands do when he keeps stopping to remind himself this is real. There were photographs, dated and time-stamped. Trucks at the quarry, license plates legible, the Crane Industries logo visible on every door panel. Barrels being rolled down ramps in the dark. Men in coveralls without faces, but with hands, with watches, with rings that a good investigator could match. There were manifests, shipping documents from chemical plants 2 states over, cross-referenced with the dates on the photographs. There were water samples, lab results from a private lab in Bangor, the kind of lab a paranoid old woman might have used to keep things off-grid. Levels of arsenic, lead, numbers that meant nothing to Lena and that made Owen Walsh's mouth go thin and white at the corners. There was a map, hand-drawn in pencil. The water table beneath Stonebridge. The flow paths from the quarry. The wells affected. Marked in tiny letters the names of families. The Calloway place was on it. Annie's cabin had a small circle around it. There was a ledger. Names, dates, amounts. Interest rates that had no business being legal. Hartwell, Calvin. The first line, a loan of $7,000. 2 years later, with compounded interest, the figure was $31,000. 5 years later, $58,000. The numbers grew like something rotting. Owen looked up. "This is not what I thought it was." "What did you think it was?" "I thought it was a few photographs, some names, enough to make trouble, enough to embarrass him." He pressed both hands flat against the documents. "This is enough to bury him. This is enough for federal racketeering, for environmental crimes, for conspiracy to commit. This is enough to bring down everyone he ever paid." He looked at her. "Your grandmother built a federal case, alone, in her 70s, while she was dying. I know. Lina, I know." Owen sat back. He put his hand over his mouth. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at her. He looked at the documents. "All right. All right. I'll be on the phone for the next 48 hours. We need to get this to people who cannot be reached. FBI, EPA Criminal Division, State Attorney General, maybe Justice. How long does it take?" "Forever. Weeks for the first response. A month before anyone takes a meeting. Several months before there's an indictment. The legal process is not fast, Lena. It is patient. Like your grandmother." "Patient? Yes. I can do patient." He looked at her again. He nodded. I think you can. She did not go straight back to the barn. She stopped at Ruthie's. The diner was open. Ruth May was behind the counter. She had bags under her eyes, the kind you get from not sleeping. She had her hair tied back the way you tie it when you have been working all night. She had been crying. Lena could tell. Ruth May. Honey, I have something to tell you. Sit. She sat. Ruth May poured coffee. She did not ask. She set the cup in front of Lena, and then she sat in the booth across from her and she put both hands around her own cup, and she waited. Lena told her about the safe, about the money, about the portfolio, about Owen. She did not show her the lab results. She did not need to. Ruth May had been waiting for this morning for years. Lena could see it in her face. When she finished, Ruth May set her coffee cup down. She stared at it. She said very quietly, He's going to fight. I know. He's going to come for you. He's going to come for me. He's going to come for everyone he can think of. He's going to do everything he did to your grandmother, only worse because she was an old woman in a barn, and you are a young woman with a lawyer and a federal case. I know. He's going to try to scare you off the way he scared the rest of us off. I know. And a pause. Ruth May looked up. And we are going to let him. Excuse me. We are going to let him come. Because every move he makes from this point forward, with the eye of the FBI watching, is rope. And he has a lot of rope to choose from. Your grandmother used to say that. Crane is rope. Crane's whole problem is that he cannot stop being rope. Lena let out a laugh that was not really a laugh, a breath, a small, sharp thing. My grandmother. Your grandmother. I would have liked her. Ruth May reached across the table. She put her hand over Lena's. She would have liked you, baby. She would have liked you more than she could stand. The first move came that afternoon. Lena was at the barn sweeping. Just sweeping. It was the only thing she could do that did not require thinking. She was moving dust from one part of the floor to another. She was making the place hers. She heard the car before she saw it. She heard it because there is only one kind of engine that purrs that way on a town road. Smooth. Expensive. Out of place. She set the broom down. She walked to the open door. Garrett Pierce got out of the black sedan. He was alone. He did not have his coat on. He had a sweater, the kind that costs $400 and is designed to look like it didn't cost anything. He smiled. She did not. Miss Hartwell. Mr. Pierce. May I come in? No. A pause. The smile thinned, sharpened, got real for half a second. I think you should reconsider. I think you should leave. I came to offer a revised number. I'm not interested in your number. It's 12,000. Goodbye, Mr. Pierce. 15. Goodbye. $20,000 cash, Miss Hartwell. By close of business today. No questions. No paperwork beyond the standard. You'd have $20,000 in your hand before sundown. She stood in the doorway of her barn, her hand on the frame. the wood old and gray under her palm, the wind moving in the pines behind her. She looked at him. She did not raise her voice. "You hurt my mother." The smile fell off his face. It was the first time she had ever seen Garrett Pierce's actual face. Not the salesman. The thing under the salesman. She held his eyes. "You hurt my mother. You hurt my father. You hurt Ruth May's Annie. You hurt Owen Walsh's father. You hurt my grandmother slow by stealing her years from her one at a time. I didn't. You did. Maybe not your hands. But your hands took the checks. So, your hands." His mouth opened. It closed. "You can leave," Lena said. "Or you can stand on my property a minute longer and I can call the sheriff and report a trespass. The sheriff still works for Crane, doesn't he? So that would be interesting. It would be in a public record." Pierce looked at her for a long time. She watched him decide. She watched him decide that an 18-year-old girl in a fallen-down barn was the wrong place to escalate today. She watched him learn in real time that he had been wrong about her since the moment he had stood up in the general store. He got back in his car. He drove away. The dust settled. Lena stood in the doorway. She did not realize she was shaking until he was out of sight. Then she sat down, right there, on the threshold, half in the barn, half out. She put her head between her knees. She breathed. She had done it. She had stood up to him. Wendell came to the barn that night. He came alone, on foot, through the snow, in his old coat, with his old hat, with both hands deep in his pockets. Lena saw him from a long way off through the bare trees. She came outside. She watched him walk up. He stopped maybe 10 feet from her. He took his hat off. He held it against his chest. He did not speak. "Wendell. Lena. You walked." "I did." "It's 3 miles." "It is." She waited. He looked at the ground. He looked at the barn. He looked finally at her. "I have something to tell you. I want you to hear it from me, before anyone else tells you." The cold around them got colder. "Okay. 20 years ago, Victor Crane came into my store. He had 2 men with him. They were not from here. He told me he knew where my daughter Jenny worked. He named places she went. He named times she would be there. His voice did not shake. That was the worst part. It did not shake. He told me he was not threatening her. He said he was making sure I understood what kind of community we lived in. He said your grandmother was an old woman who would not see reason. He said he hoped I, as a businessman, would be smarter. A breath. He asked me to keep an eye on her, to tell him when she came to town, to tell him who she met with, to tell him when she sent mail, and to whom. Wendell. I've been telling him things, Lena, for 20 years, about your grandmother, about this barn, about the day you came in on the bus. She could not speak. The cold had moved inside her. He kept going. I have also for 20 years been telling him almost nothing true. I told him your grandmother was eccentric and slow and harmless. I told him she was getting weaker. I told him she was about to crack and sell. None of it true. I lied to him with my mouth, and I told the truth to her with my hands. Because every time I told him a lie, I went home that night and wrote what I had told him in a notebook. And I wrote what I knew was actually true next to it. And I have many full notebooks now. I kept it. I kept all of it. He stopped. He looked at his hat in his hands. I should have told her. I should have told you yesterday. I should have told you in the store. I was afraid. Jenny is grown now. She lives in Portland. She has 2 children. I told myself if I did not act, if I just stayed small, she would stay safe. I have lived in that smallness for 20 years. He looked up. There were tears in his eyes. They had not fallen yet. They were the kind that sit on the lip of the eye for a long time before they decide. I am here because Owen Walsh called me an hour ago. He told me what was in your grandmother's portfolio. He told me what was happening. He told me I had a choice. What did he say the choice was? He said I could keep telling Crane the lies, or I could give him my notebooks and stop being a coward and finish the work your grandmother started. What did you say? Wendell took a step forward. He went down on one knee in the snow. He set his hat on the ground beside him. I said I was bringing you the notebooks tonight. They are in the truck back at the store. I will go get them. I will give you anything you ask for, child. Anything. I will sit at any witness stand. I will say anything that is true. I will lose my store. I will lose my house. I do not care. I cannot carry this anymore. He bowed his head. I am asking you to forgive me. I do not deserve it. I do not expect it. I am asking anyway. Lena stood there, in the snow, with her hand on the frame of the barn. She thought very clearly. He sold us out. He betrayed my grandmother. He fed Crane every move she made for 2 decades. He has been part of why I never got the letters. And she thought about her father, Calvin, driving his family through a snowstorm at the end of his life, finally trying. She thought about the kind of man who would do something terrible for 20 years because he was scared. She thought about how she had been scared for 2 years, and how scared had made her hard, had made her sharp, had made her into a different shape than she might have been. She thought scared makes people into things they did not start out being. It was not an excuse, but it was true. She walked across the snow. She knelt down in front of Wendell Doyle. She put her hand on the side of his face. "Get up," she said. "Old men do not kneel in the snow. Not in my yard. Not for me. Not ever." His face crumpled. "Lena." "Get up, Wendell." He got up. "Get the notebooks." "All right. And get warm. You walked 3 miles. You're going to make yourself sick." "All right. And Wendell." "Yes. I forgive you. I do not know if I should. I do not know if I will tomorrow. But tonight I do. Because my grandmother forgave bigger things than this in her life. And she made me out of the people she forgave." He cried then. He cried like an old man cries, which is the worst kind. quiet and from somewhere deeper than tears are supposed to come from. She put both her arms around him. She held him. She let him cry into her shoulder in the snow in front of her grandmother's barn. And somewhere she would think this later when she had time, somewhere her grandmother saw and was glad. The case moved slowly, the way Owen had said it would. The first 2 weeks were silence. Lena went about her days. She swept the barn. She mended the roof in the warmer hours with help from Wendell's nephew, a quiet man named Tobias who would not take her money. She cooked food on the kerosene heater and ate it sitting on the workbench. She read her mother's diary, the small yellow one, in pieces, 1 or 2 pages a night. She was rationing it. There would never be another. Then the first phone call, an EPA investigator, a woman with a kind voice and a careful way of asking questions. Owen sat with Lena at the diner while she answered. Then a second phone call. FBI. A man this time. Sharper, faster, more interruptions. Lena answered everything. She did not embellish. She did not need to. Then a meeting. Then another. Then men in suits coming to the barn with cameras and notebooks. Then a state environmental crew at the quarry with hazmat gear taking core samples. Then the news story in the Bangor Daily News. Small at first. Page 7. Then page 3. Then the front page. Then Crane Industries was named in a federal indictment. Then Garrett Pierce was arrested by federal agents at the airport. He had been trying to leave the country. Then the trial date was set, 8 months away. Then it was 6. Then 4. Then 2. Lina Hartwell turned 19 in the barn she now owned outright, surrounded by women who had decided without being asked that her birthday belonged to all of them. Ruth May made the cake. Blueberry, of course. Lillian Ashby brought it in from her car. She had stored it in the trunk to keep it from getting jostled. She set it on the workbench. She lit the 19 candles with hands that did not shake at all. Lena looked at it. She looked at the women standing around her. Ruth May, Lillian. 2 other women from town she was learning to know, Marlene, who ran the hardware store, and Beth, who had been Margaret's hairdresser for years and had cried at the funeral before Lena had even known a funeral had happened. She looked at the cake. She looked at the candles. "Make a wish, honey," Ruth May said. Lena closed her eyes. She did not make a wish. She gave thanks instead. She gave thanks for the women around her, for the candles, for the hands that had baked the cake, for the woman who had built the road that had brought her here, for her own mother who had been allowed only 34 years on the earth and who lived now in a yellow cloth diary against Lena's chest, for her father who had failed at almost everything and who had, at the very end, tried. Then she blew out the candles, all 19 in one breath. The women cheered. Outside, the late winter wind moved through the trees. Inside the barn was warm. The trial lasted 11 weeks. It was not what television had taught Lana to expect. It was slow. It was procedural. It was 1,000 small motions and objections and a stream of expert witnesses talking about contamination plumes and groundwater modeling and statutory definitions of conspiracy. It was also in the middle of all that the bones of her family laid out one by one on the record. Owen led the civil suit that ran alongside the federal criminal case. He brought in a senior environmental attorney from Boston, a woman in her 60s named Cordelia Penrose, who had argued before the Supreme Court twice, and who treated Lena like a daughter from the moment they met. Lena testified. She wore the blue cardigan. She told the court about the 18 letters. She told them about the photograph. She told them about the loft. She did not cry on the stand. She cried in the bathroom afterwards, with Ruth May standing outside the stall door holding her purse, telling her it was okay, baby. It was okay. The world was listening now. Crane's defense attorneys tried to paint Margaret as unstable. They produced witnesses. The witnesses crumbled under cross-examination from Cordelia Penrose. Ruth May took the stand and described her daughter's illness in a voice so steady, the courtroom went silent. Wendell Doyle took the stand and described 20 years of lies for 42 minutes. And when he was done, 3 jurors were crying, and Wendell Doyle was the most respected man in the county again, the way he had been before he had ever met Victor Crane. And then, in the 7th week, in the period when it had started to feel possible that Crane might walk after all because his lawyers had pressured one of the state witnesses and the witness had refused to testify, and a critical piece of the chain of custody had been damaged in that week, Owen Walsh came to the barn at 10 o'clock at night. He banged on the door. He had a sheet of paper in his hand. He had been running. Lena. What? There's an address. What address? Margaret left me a sealed envelope a long time ago. She told me not to open it unless everything was about to fail. She told me to wait until I was sure. I waited. Owen. There's an address in here. There's a name. There's a man I've never heard of. He shoved the paper at her. She read it. A name. Silas Hollis. An address. A road number in northern Vermont. A cabin location, not a street. A note. In Margaret's handwriting. He has the second ledger. He has been alive longer than Crane thinks. He is afraid. Be kind. Use my name. Lena looked up. Owen was breathing hard. Your grandmother knew the witnesses might fail. She built a backup. She built a backup. She built a backup, Lena, years ago. She found his accountant. Crane thought the man was dead. He's been alive this whole time. In a cabin. With her protection. Waiting. Waiting for what? For us. They drove through the night. Owen drove. Lena sat in the passenger seat with the sheet of paper in her lap. The dashboard lights were green. The road was empty. They crossed into Vermont at 3 a.m. They found the road at 4:30. It was a gravel one. It wound through pines. They almost missed the turnoff. They almost missed the cabin. The cabin was set back. There was smoke rising from the chimney even in the dark. Whoever was inside was awake. Owen knocked. The door did not open. He knocked again, a voice through the door. Old, wary. Who is it? Lena stepped forward. My name is Lena Hartwell. I am Margaret Hartwell's granddaughter. She sent me. A long pause, long enough that Lena thought they had lost. Then, the chain slid. The bolt turned. The door opened. Silas Hollis was a small man, maybe 70. White hair and a fringe around a bald spot. A face that had spent years afraid of the sound of cars on gravel. He looked at Lena. He looked at her for a long time. He said, "You have her eyes." Then he stepped back. He let them in. Silas Hollis testified on a Tuesday afternoon. He walked into the federal courthouse in Bangor on the arm of a U.S. Marshal. He wore a suit that did not quite fit. He had not worn a suit in years. He took the stand. He swore the oath. Then, for 3 hours in a quiet voice that did not waver, he laid out Victor Crane's empire from the inside. Bank accounts, shell companies, names of officials Crane had paid, specific dates, specific amounts. The kind of detail you only get from a man who had handled the books himself. He brought to the courtroom 3 bankers' boxes of original ledgers. The ledgers had been kept by Margaret Hartwell in the floor of her own barn for years. Silas had given them to her when he had run. She had kept them safe. She had returned them to him 6 months before her death with instructions. "Wait," she had written. "Wait for the call. It will come from a man named Owen Walsh or from a young woman with my eyes. Trust them. Tell what you know." Silas Hollis told what he knew. The jury was out for 2 days. They came back on a Thursday afternoon. Lena was in the courtroom. Ruth May was beside her. Lillian was beside Ruth May. Wendell was in the row behind. Owen was at the prosecutor's table. The verdict was read. Guilty. On dozens of counts. The judge passed sentence 3 weeks later. 25 years. Federal prison. No possibility of parole until Victor Crane would no longer be a problem of any kind. Crane did not look at Lena when they let him out. She looked at him. She watched him go. She did not feel triumph. That surprised her. She had thought she would feel triumph. She felt instead very tired and very full. And underneath both of those, very, very free. She used the money the way her grandmother had hoped. $20,000 to Ruth May, who would not take it for herself, and so spent it on a scholarship at the county college named for her daughter Annie. The Annie Calloway Memorial Scholarship for Young Women in Environmental Science. The first recipient was a 17-year-old girl from a trailer park outside of Stonebridge who had never had a passport and now had a future. $10,000 to the families on the ledger. The Calloways. 2 others. $5,000 to Lillian Ashby's church, which had been keeping a food pantry going on bake sales and broken faith. $15,000 to the barn. Roof. Wiring, plumbing, windows, insulation. Tobias Doyle did most of the work with Wendell helping when his knees would let him, and a small crew of local men who would not let Lena pay full price for anything. The last $12,000 she put in a bank account she labeled in her own handwriting Maggie's hands. She would need it. The barn was finished in the late fall, almost a year to the day after Lena had first walked into it with a kerosene lantern and a key and a heart she had been carrying like a closed fist. It did not look the same. The roof no longer sagged. The big front doors hung straight. New windows let in light from 3 directions. The downstairs was a long, warm room with a wood stove and a kitchen along one wall, and a long oak table sanded and refinished, and built from the bench Margaret had used for years kept, and made bigger. The loft was now 4 small bedrooms, each one with a single bed, each one with a quilt made by women in the town, each one with a tulip-shaped wooden doorknob. The workshop behind the main room was a workshop again. The pegboard restored, the tools cleaned and rehung, new ones added. Margaret's flagstone with the crescent moon chip had been left in place. The safe beneath was gone. The hole had been filled in with concrete, but Lena had ordered a small brass plaque set into the stone level, with the floor that read, "The foundation is everything." The first 3 girls arrived in October. They came on a Greyhound bus, the same kind of bus Lena had ridden a year before. They were 17 and 18 and 18. They had aged out of foster care in 3 different states. They had been told about Maggie's hands by a social worker who had read about Lena in a magazine and had called Owen Walsh's office on a Wednesday afternoon and had said, "I have a girl. Can you take her?" Owen had said, "We can take 3. The girls walked up the drive carrying duffel bags. Lena stood in the doorway. She did not say anything brave. She did not give a speech. She did not have to. Ruth May was in the kitchen behind her. Pancakes were on the griddle. The cast iron pan was sizzling. The smell of blueberries warming with butter rolled out into the cold November air to meet the girls before Lena did. The youngest of them started crying at the smell. Lena understood. She had cried at the smell of those same pancakes a year before. She opened the door wider. She said, come in, you're home." The last scene of this story is a small one. It is not a courtroom. It is not a verdict. It is not the night Lena opened a safe under a stone. It is a Tuesday evening in February. Snow is falling outside. Inside the wood stove is burning. Ruth May is in the kitchen with 3 teenage girls who used to be lost. She is teaching them to fold blueberries into pancake batter. She is teaching them the trick where you do not stir the batter, you cut it. She is wearing the same flour-dusted apron she has worn for as long as anyone can remember. Her hair is a little wider than it was a year ago. Wendell Doyle is at the long table teaching one of the older girls how to read the Bangor Daily News, the way a smart person reads a newspaper, which is to say with suspicion. Tobias is fixing a hinge. Lillian Ashby is in the rocking chair with a paperback in her lap and her reading glasses halfway down her nose. Owen Walsh has just come in the door. He has snow on his shoulders. He has a paper bag in one hand. He has set it on the table without saying what is in it. Pie, probably. He has not stopped bringing pie. Lena is at the workbench in the workshop, the same workbench her grandmother sat at for decades. She is reading the last page of Margaret's journal, the very last page, the one she has been saving for a long time. She has read it many times. She reads it again. My little bird, I have written you 18 letters. None of them reached you. This one will. You are holding it. You have walked the road I built. You have done the things I asked. You are sitting somewhere now alive, free on a piece of earth that no one will ever take from you again. If I could tell you one last thing, it would be this. You are not what was done to you. You are not the home you grew up in. You are not the system that lost you or the man who stole you from me. You are not the silence I was forced to keep. You are what you build. You are who you choose to love when the time comes to choose. You are the room you keep for people who do not yet know it is waiting for them. I kept a room for you. You have made the room into a house. You have made the house into a home. You will, I think, in time make the home into a town. That is how it goes, my darling. Love that has been forced underground does not die. It surfaces in the next generation. It always surfaces. Always. I loved you before you were born. I will love you after I am gone. There is no force on earth, no man and no court, and no system that can sever a love like that. It is older than any of us. You will not be alone. You have never been alone. You will not be alone again. Your loving grandmother, Maggie. Lena closes the journal. She holds it against her chest. Outside the workshop door, she can hear them. Ruth May laughing at something one of the girls has said. Wendell reading something out loud in his slow, careful voice. Lillian gently humming a hymn she has known since she was a child. Owen asking if anyone has seen the second pie tin, because he is sure he brought 2. The wood stove ticking. The girls, all 3 of them, in the kitchen, finding out for the first time in their lives what it means to be wanted by a place. Lena puts her hand on the workbench. The wood is warm. She knows now that it is the warmth of her own hand on the wood. She also has come to know that this does not matter. The warmth is shared. The warmth is given and received. The warmth is the same warmth that was here decades ago when Margaret first stood at this bench, and years later when she taught her daughter to sand a board, and the last time alone when there was no one left to call. The warmth has not left. It has only been waiting for someone to come, to put a hand on it, to stay. Lena stays. She stands up. She tucks the journal under her arm. She walks to the door of the workshop. She opens it. She steps into the room where her people are. Outside the windows, snow falls onto the barn that is no longer a barn, on a piece of land that is no longer worthless, in a town that is no longer a joke around a woman who is no longer a ghost. Inside, somebody calls her name. She answers.